All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mike in New Haven podcast. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, that was the continuation of another mini-series, The Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite. Captain Dennis Tardio joined me, a 23-year retired veteran of the FDNY. He talked about some interesting jobs in the 70s and 80s, working in a ladder company, how much he loved working in Manhattan, and how he survived the events of 9/11. He led his men into the North Tower, and miraculously, all of them returned home safe and sound, when so many others did not. So Captain Tardio was a really cool guy to talk to. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. So from the FDNY back to the NYPD for the continuation of another miniseries, volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. We've had some great guests for this miniseries, and today's bound to be no different with my next guest, who is a man who came from the Midwest to take a bite out of the Big Apple, joining the NYPD in 1990. He patrolled and cajoled any and every situation in the city before really cashing in his chips and making the move to the bomb squad in 1995, where over the course of the next 15 years, he'd work on some of the city's most major investigations and take on the terrifying task few would volunteer for, putting it all on the line and putting on in that infamous bomb suit and walking towards potential death and destruction. Retiring in 2010, he keeps active as an instructor these days, and that is retired NYPD bomb squad Detective Jeff Oberdier for volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room. Jeff, welcome. How are you?
How are you, Mike? I'm doing well.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So you grew up in Ohio. Take me through that.
It's kind of an interesting journey. I grew up on a small farm. We had a couple pigs, some chickens, things like that. My grandfather had a bigger farm. And me and my nephews and my cousins, brothers, everybody, we worked the farm. I mean, I milked cows, did some other mean things, slaughtered pigs because we had to eat. And my grandmother's like a local Wyandotte heritage Indian, so she never let nothing go to waste as far as chickens and pigs and cows. And we did a lot of hard work, but it built a lot of character. I'm somewhat of a workaholic. I guess I got that definitely from my grandfather. And it's a little north of Columbus, Richwood, Ohio, Marion, Ohio. That's more or less where I grew up. And anybody that's been through Ohio, they know about the cornfields.
Absolutely.
A lot
of them, a lot to go around. So you went over to the Air Force, and that would later segue perfectly into your work at the bomb squad, which we'll get to in just a bit. Because while in the Air Force, you were working as an EOD investigator and an EOD Tech, or what they call a master blaster. So why the Air Force?
Well, it's kind of interesting. My whole family, a lot of Army, a lot of Marines. And I said, let me go something a little easier. And kind of where I grew up, you was either going to work the farm or you're going to work in a factory. I says, I got to do something. So that was one of the scariest things I ever did in my life, was break away when I was a little over 18 and raise my hand and says, I got to go somewhere and do something. And it's kind of funny, when you take the test, they kind of gauge what type of jobs you got that you qualified for. And one of them was called EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Mainly what I saw was a $2,000 completion bonus. Back then, 1982, that's a lot of money for a young kid. So I didn't really care about what explosive ordnance was. I said, it's something to do with bombs. And even the recruiter goes, you don't want that. So I said, really? I'm taking it. It's one of the hardest schools, one of the hardest things that somebody can do, because it's about a year long. And if you flunk one part of the course, there's approximately 8 to 10 parts of the school. If you flunk one part of that school, they'll give you one chance to repeat it. And if you don't do well again, you're out. So usually back then, and still today, it's probably about a 70% chance of you won't make it through the school. Me being an old hillbilly from Ohio, that was tough, but I did it. And that's how I went in the Air Force. And that's how I got the EOD job.
There you go. We're talking with Jeff Oberdier here in the Mike New Haven podcast. This is volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. So you did it for 6 years, 82 to 88. This is an interesting time because the Cold War is kind of going on. But we're not really like the last 20 years. America's not really in a particularly heated conflict like we've previously seen. But nonetheless, take me through some of the more interesting experiences that you had with the, involving EOD and some notable jobs involving having to render safe some devices.
Well, it's interesting because I started out, you're a rookie like anything else when you start something new. And the rookies get all the weird little things to do, like wash your vehicles, do this. So a lot of it was kind of boring. You had to learn all the tools, the procedures, the equipment. And I started out in Charleston, South Carolina, which was beautiful, small shop. And we got activated to go to down south with the little conflict, like in '83. Very short-lived. So that's my combat experience. And mainly we did a lot of range clearances, inventories, things like that. And eventually I volunteered to go to Europe because I was in 6 years. And that's where you really start working hard. It's a different type of organization than the Air Force. It's more combat ready. And even back then in '82, it's interesting, outside the base, the Russians could take photos of the base because it was on German soil. So, you couldn't say nothing. And it's pretty interesting to see Soviet type plates on vehicles, which is totally allowed. And over there, we did some plane crashes because sometimes Air Force pilots make mistakes or the plane breaks, whatever. So that's a long type of process that you do. We actually was getting a new EOD bomb shop being built. I was at Han Air Base. And the funny story with that is, as we was digging the foundation, along with the Germans does a lot of the contracting on base. German guy hits something metal. He looks down, he goes, "I'm going on a break." It was a 100-pound British bomb that was live, exactly where our new shop was being built. So we had to earn our money a little bit that day. But as far as like the IEDs in the military, excuse me, we wasn't subject to that as much unless they really requested a need to go off base or something. Well, I take that back. Right when I got to Han, we did have a faction group over there, Green Army faction, something like that. They did do fire extinguisher bombs on the officers' club. And it was actually off base. That's why they was able to get fire extinguisher bombs in there. One or two of them went off. So that was my first real exposure to like a homemade or IED, as they call it. And I was very new. So it was pretty interesting. But mostly, except for the guys that went over to Iraq, Afghanistan, they really dealt with the IEDs a lot more than I ever did being in.
And that is something that definitely earns your stripes, to say the least. And if that doesn't test your mettle, I don't think anything will. And so you talked about earlier, wanting to do something, and that is something. So now that finishes in 1988, some people would just say, okay, let me go back to, where I originally was from, or even, within the same state, you have Cincinnati, which is a fairly large city. You have Cleveland, another fairly large city, but you didn't go back to there. You went to New York. You came up to the big bad Big Apple and joined the NYPD in 1990. Why New York City?
Another funny story. I met my wife. She's my girlfriend at the time in the military. She's Puerto Rican from the Bronx. So how did I lose that? Why? We wasn't going back to Ohio. So, and it was the best thing I ever did. We almost like flipped a coin in a way. But she gave me the option, because in my career field, I wanted to continue. And most places, either firemen or police officers do the bomb work in civilian. So she kind of said, well, we'll go to Columbus or Cleveland. And it's just something in me like, nah, there's something better out there for me. If I work hard, and she brought up, why don't you try NYPD? So why not? So it's an interesting venture, definitely. I had to wait about 3 years to get on the job because of Mayor Koch and I'm trying to think of the mayor
Dinkins.
after Koch, Mayor Dinkins. There's a hold. Like I get called on Friday. Hey, you're going to the police academy. Sunday night, I get a call. Go, no, you're not going. So that happened like 2-3 years. I'd always have to ask for my job back in the interim with the security company. So it was tough. It was trying, but like advice to anybody, don't give up. People will tell you no all the time. No, no, no. And it could beat you up after a while. But I never gave up. And luck has it, my wife goes, oh, I'm kind of bored. She waits about 4 months to go into the police academy. I'm running around gym class with my wife. Hi, honey. Hi, honey. So
She's on the
that's why
job
I
too?
came to New York. Yeah, she's retired. We retired at the same time.
Wow.
She did most of her career in the 3-4 precinct. She's got 2 riots under her belt. I got 0.
But you earned your keep because, hey, some of the cases that you worked on, who cares if you didn't get a write-up? That was some headline making stuff that we'll talk about as we go along. And so, I always like to ask my guest about the academy. Maybe you didn't know this, maybe you did when you got into the academy, but this was pre-merger in 95. And as I explained before on the podcast for my listeners, before Mayor Giuliani did the merger in 95, once you graduated the academy, you didn't just go to the NYPD like you do now. You either went to the NYPD or you went to the New York City Transit Police, you ride behind, or you went to the New York City Housing Authority Police Department. So I don't know if they ever told you that when you were in the academy, but being a new guy, not being from the area, did you care which department you went to, or were you just happy to just get on the job, period, considering what you went through in that 3-year span?
I was just happy. My wife was a little upset because we go down together and they tell you which department you have. So I go to one table and they go, you got housing. I go, what is that? I don't really care. And they tell my wife she's got NYPD. So she's like yelling at them, like, my husband wants to be a bomb guy in this and housing don't have it. And I'm like, well, that's the way it is. And so I go in this little room and there's actually guys crying. Like, why are you guys crying? We're going to be cops. Oh, it's housing. I go, I don't know any better. The cop is a cop.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, housing cop was the best thing to make you into a cop and make you mature a little bit, because you got to make a lot of decisions out there on your own. They don't really babysit you in housing. And the project, it's a hard place because there's so many good people that live there, but you don't really see them. Sometimes you interact with the bad ones because that's when they need help. Who are they going to call? Who are they going to call a cop? And I get that. I met a lot of beautiful people in the projects, but the problem is you don't see them all the time. And it was a very eye-opening and great experience. I would never change it. Great people I work with and met. Fantastic.
I have a good friend of mine who worked in housing, Detective Scott Wagner, who did major cases primarily. You know him?
Yeah, I've definitely met him.
Yep. Scott's a good guy. He's been on this show. And he talked about just with housing, there was such a uniqueness to it because you guys were gritty. You guys just, as you just alluded to, you got it done on your own. It was such now I don't want to say ragtag, but it was just such a committed and close-knit group of people because of the fact that it was a much smaller department. And as a result, it probably paved the way for a better understanding of the communities that you worked in because, listen, not that I'm knocking the NYPD, but whatever precinct had a certain area at the time in the Bronx or Queens or wherever a project is, they know it obviously because it's their territory, but do they know it as well as the housing guys and gals? Maybe not, because housing's there every single day. Whereas NYPD, you got other calls in other parts of the territory that you possess, you don't really get that opportunity. And so, working in housing, some good guys were lost along the way. Paul Heidelberger was lost in 92.
Yep.
Rudy Thomas, John Williamson, the last was Freddie Bosch in 95. I don't know how well you knew these guys, but when they passed away, how did housing get managed then?
It's tough because like you said, it's a smaller group, and I never knock NYPD, but reality, they used to bust our horns so bad. Housing's not on the air because there's limited manpower, and you had a lot of projects. Doesn't matter if it's PSA 1. I worked in 7, so it was tough. You get a thick skin, and you usually know somebody that's either gets sick or die. It's a lot smaller community. But like I said, I never change it because some of the great people, and a lot of them, once the merge happened, I did the lateral because I wanted to become, a bomb technician. Most of my friends, they rose up the ladder quickly. Inspectors, captains. So they knew about how to deal with people. I'm not saying NYPD didn't. I'm just saying we had a little bit more of an edge in our younger career. Good, bad, indifference.
Scott, it's funny he refers to it. He was not pro-merger, and he ended up finishing out his career as a really solid detective. But he's like, it was a hostile takeover, Mike. And, I can see how he might have felt that way. Because, listen, it was a department with such a rich history. It started in 1952 and it continued for 43 years, a distinguished. And it was a federally accredited agency towards the end of it. It was a really well-run agency. And some interesting cases were worked there. The beauty of it is that the Detective Bureau described it to me, or members of the Detective Bureau, I should say, one time, who appeared on the show at different points, have said, the beauty of it is when we had a homicide in these areas, housing would send their manpower from their Detective Bureau over to us, and that would help matters. So 95, the merge happens, transit goes in, housing goes in. NYPD now has the Housing Bureau, and now it has the Transit Bureau, which continues on to this day, of course. And you go into the bomb squad. Now you're not handling packages right away. There's a year-long probationary period. But this is a squad with a nucleus of really talented guys who've been there a while during the crazy 1970s and 1980s. You got Dennis Mulcahy, Kevin Barry, Don Sadawi. You got Dan McNally there. Mike White's there. On top of that, the late Claude Richards, who we'll talk about later. This is a great group of guys. So when you got there, who would you say was most helpful in taking you under their wing and showing you the way around the world?
Well, it was interesting because a few of the guys thought I was tainted, which is okay because I had prior military experience and I had a real Southern accent. So they like, who is this guy? And but Joe Patowski, great man. I would not want to get hit by him to this day. He's one heck of a boxer.
Middleweight, yeah.
So he kind of took me in, and I get it. So some people are standoffish because you got to prove yourself worth it. And I kept my mouth shut and I did what I was told. And I was on a tough team initially, which is I'd never have it any other way. I had Brian Toohey, John Harvey, Joe Patowski, and Danny Richards. So that was my first team. A lot of experience and a lot of to the point, which I wouldn't have it any other way. It's very honest, especially Danny. Danny was the most honest guy. I mean, we can talk about him a little later. But yeah, it's very interesting. And you feel out of place because until you start proving yourself and working and making sure the equipment's right. And they had dogs, volunteer to help do whatever, clean up dog poop, clean the kennels, check the trucks. You do what you got to do because I always tell guys, you're blessed to be here. You may earn it, but you're blessed to be here and do the right thing. This is a very elite unit and a lot of tradition. Back in 1903 is when the bomb squad started. So a lot of guys prior to us did a lot harder work than we ever did.
Not nearly the same amount of equipment. And we'll talk about an interesting story from the 100th anniversary of the bomb squad, where you put together all the old timers in 2003. I'll get to that a little bit later. But it's interesting because you had a similar experience to Jim Carano in that Jim got to the bomb squad in 92, and a year later, the 1993 World Trade Center bombing happens. And that's kind of his welcome to the bomb squad moment. So for you, getting there in 95, a year later, 96, TWA Flight 800 goes down. Take me through that investigation from your perspective.
I still remember, it was a beautiful night, and we was in the squad. We was just watching the TV, cleaning things up, and it made the news. And all of a sudden, back then we was on pagers. So a couple of pagers went off, the phones were going off, so everything kicked up quickly. And to start an investigation at night, it's a little disadvantage, especially in the water. You're talking about an aircraft, a large aircraft. So a lot of disadvantages to start. Then it's a multi-response. You got NASA, Suffolk, FBI, NTSB, everybody's running to see what happened. And very tragic. I mean, my neighbor up in Rockland County, he decided to go. I think he's an ABC or CBS executive. He decided, his wife and his daughter decided to go to Paris. The twin boys, they fought and said, no, we're staying home. So these boys are probably in their late 40s now. And so that was a little personal connection there. And once the investigation started, it was phenomenal, actually, how many all these agencies work together. Perfect as far as how deep it was, where it landed, came apart. We recovered probably over 90% of that aircraft. And I think 99% of the people I was on board. So in that aspect, it was a total success. And very tragic. I mean, to this day, I don't know if the body of that aircraft is still out in Calverton in the hangar.
They took it apart recently.
So I spent many days out there going through the wreckage with Jack Lanigan, Steve Burbridge, a lot of other great men, Kevin Miles from the FBI, and God bless him, James Koster. He just passed away not too long ago, but he is the head of the FBI at the time. And he ran a tight ship. He wanted to know. And everybody worked very well together, but there's still all these theories one way or the other. I look at me personally, I look at it as something happened inside the aircraft that, you know, as far as a bombing, I can't really say. I mean, I'd say no. Just looking, you know, you got to look at the evidence, but that's my personal opinion. And everybody's got one. I worked that thing for about 7-8 months. So it was funny. There's a small little black guy from St. Louis. Initially, when he got out there, everybody's kind of like, what is he? You know, because he wore like blue jeans and an old like warehouse shirt. He wasn't a typical investigator with the tie and the coveralls. This guy, let me tell you, he knew every part of that aircraft. You take a little piece of damage, nut or whatever, and he'll tell you exactly the location. Amazing asset. He was invaluable out there.
I imagine. If you want, for my listeners, for previous volumes of Tales from the Boom Room, you can check out Don Sadawian, two-part special for a deep dive that him and I did into TWA Flight 800 and his perspective, and also Dan McNally joined the show for a deep dive into TWA as well. So if you want to go check out those specific episodes on that specific event, you can do that. Both guys were great. Both guys have opinions of their own on it, but it's fascinating to hear. Fascinating to hear. And it's funny, Dan said to me, working with Richie Teamsma in the bomb squad at the time, who hopefully I can get on the show soon. Richie was a former aircraft guy, but the funny part about it is that he said Jerry Hogue, who was a sergeant in there. It's like, Mike, within a month, Jerry was like a walking encyclopedia about aircraft. He knew everything about it. And he picked it up like that. He didn't know anything prior, but it only took him about a month.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. So some of the people that we interacted with, you brought up Jerry Hogue. Jerry Hogue's, he had a trap as a mind. He'd read something, look at something, he'd remember. Me, it'd take me about 8 times to remember, but I'll never forget it. This is just such a tragic incident that happened. I mean, these poor people I think they knew their demise. I think they're still awake. And my buddy I worked with after I retired, John Scamilio, he was a Navy, not a Navy, but a NYPD diver working there. So he had the terrible task of bringing up the bodies. And you have to. You got families got to have closure. You got to have answers. So that's, that part of the job that you have to do, but we do it.
Yep. And they did it with dignity, which is the most important thing. I want to get to, I don't mean to name drop, but I don't want to sound like that. But I had this conversation with him off the air the other day, and I didn't realize he was there too. I knew you were there. And that's Paul Yurku, who I try to get on the show soon as well, another great bomb tech who came over from ESU. And January 13th, 1997, United Nations, 4 letter bombs there at the United Nations. It was sent specifically to a Saudi Arabian, if I remember correctly, newspaper. And the bomb squad has to go down there and obviously render it safe. This is a case that we really don't hear a lot about. We're going to spend a lot of time on 1997 because there's 2 incidents, one that we're talking about right now, another one I'll get to in a second, that really kept the bomb squad busy. So this first one, that cold day in 97, take me through it from your perspective.
Like you said, it was cold. And I think Rick Vergara and Mike Murray had the first one earlier on in the day. And I give it to the UN and the partial department down there where all the mail comes in, because if they wouldn't have tagged it or found it and started the whole operation going, somebody could have got hurt, killed, and we may have never ever responded until something blew up. But they did their job, made our job easier, because now we got Mike and Rick did the first render safe, as we call it. So now we got more intel. Then I think Charlie Hill and another individual. I'm getting old, I can't remember all the names.
Okay.
They had the second one. Then Paul and Richie had the third one. Then me and Kevin Barry had the last one. So, excuse me, it was an ongoing incident that took hours and hours. We got so much intelligence out of this. We kept, on some of the envelopes, we kept the seal from where it was shipped from, the stamping, the handwritten letters, so let other investigators do their job. And yeah, it's not talked about that much, but it was really interesting in a sorts that sometimes when you go up on a package, you don't know what it is. It could be an empty box or it could be a nuke. But this one, we knew that everyone that we're going to encounter is a real bomb with a lot of energetic material inside. So that changes your mindset a little bit also. But you feed on that. And if any bomb tech tells you they're not scared, they do things like that, something's wrong with them, I guess. They shouldn't be in the career field. Because you got to have that little edge of being not fearful, but heightened awareness and being a little scared. That's okay. Because that's how you survive. If you're not scared, then I guess you're walking into your own demise.
It's a healthy
Just
fear.
my opinion.
It's a healthy fear.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's you need that. I think having so many firemen and cops on the show, you always hear about that. There's a respect factor there, to where you know what that device is capable of, and yeah, you have the training, and you're able to apply it and do some good work. But nonetheless, if it goes off, I often quote Dennis Mulcahy because he has a great joke. It's a little dark, but it's a great joke nonetheless. If you cut, I'll imitate his little Irish accent. If you cut the right wire, you'll hear it. If you cut the wrong wire, you're never going to hear it. And he's right. He's right. So, there's that healthy respect there for what these devices can do. And we'll go from a really cold day to a really hot day. July 31st, 1997, summer in New York City. And you guys are working the night shift. It's Paul Yurku, Rich Teamsma, you, and Joe McGuire. And you're all,
Barry.
and Kevin Barry was there too?
Yeah.
Okay, he was there that night. And you guys are trying to get some sleep, and you get this call. And Paul, it was mentioned in the book, and I'll have Paul on to discuss this job, like I mentioned earlier, eventually. But the phone kept ringing, and you guys are thinking it's probably some crank call, which the book described as being a bane of the bomb squad's existence. But enough calls make, I think, Paul pick up the phone, and
Yes.
it's a job out in Brooklyn. What had happened was a gentleman who was living with his roommates saw that they were up to no good, had some bombs in the apartment. They were of Middle Eastern descent. He freaked out, understandably so. He tried to flag down some transit cops, and he can't really speak the language, but he's trying to gesture. There's bombs in the apartment. Long story short, bomb squad and ESU go in there, gunfire erupts, and they have to render some packages safe. Now, you went out to Queens with Joe McGuire, and they took the Brooklyn job. But nonetheless, when you heard what the situation was in Brooklyn, take me through what you and Joe McGuire did after that.
Well, we had a first call. It was a hand grenade job. And we took care of that. And we was coming back to the office, and we heard a lot of chatter. When you hear a lot more chatter on the radio, something's happened. Then we got a hold of Paul and Rich. They say they're responding out to this location. So I had to get a hold and make sure the supervisors was notified. So everything starts rolling. And get out to the 8-8 precinct, I think, and they start assembling some type of response to this. The detectives are debriefing this young gentleman, and a plan was formulated. This is the first time I met Joe Dolan. This guy's a monster. If you ever saw The Incredible Hulk, this is Joe Dolan. And I just kept looking at him like, man, this guy's a monster. So he's on the ESU part of the entry team. And me and Kevin, we're staying outside because it's Paul and Richie's job. Whatever they need, if they need the robot set up, bomb suit, whatever, that's our job to help these guys. So Richie and Paulie goes in with the ESU, and like you said, there's a shootout. The guys trying to hit the switches. So that was a very intense job, and your adrenaline's way up here. They got the bad guys out of the apartment, and now is a long, tedious job of making sure there's no more devices. Is that device safe? What type of other material is valuable in that apartment? Excuse me. One of the weird things of that job is how the apartment was set up. It wasn't easy to get it in and out, either in the bomb suit or like they did with the initial raid. I mean, you're going into the unknown, and it's a turn here, a half a left turn there. It is very strange how to get in that apartment. Then you had to go through a courtyard prior to getting in there. So, yeah, that was a pretty tough job. But once again, we was there for hours, grabbing any type of evidence, a hammer, a screwdriver, anything that could be valuable into the construction of that item, what was in that item. And once we get everything away from the scene, then you start the methodical process of taking this item further apart to get more evidence, going through all the other evidence that you recovered at the scene. Now you're working with the FBI, detectives, and it's a long process. You get kind of tired, but you keep pushing. And eventually this item, I don't know, I think Paul and Richie had to go down to Quantico and do some more testing on it because this item had so much wire involved. And like anything else, before you go to court, you got to make sure everything's covered. Because if there's one breaking that wire, the defense attorney could say, well, it's not a bomb. They can make an argument for that. Mm-hmm. And so that's where everything we do is very methodical. Sometimes chemical reaction bomb, they call them, like the soda bottle, and you shake it up and it expands. That's still an investigation because if somebody gets hurt and it goes to court, you got to make sure everything is properly done. So a lot of people only hear or see the excitement of these jobs. Oh, there's a bomb in the apartment. There's so much behind the scenes that goes on. A lot of people that never get thanked. That is very crucial and helpful to that investigation. And that's what I always try to do. I always try to thank the first cop there, EMS, anybody that's there to help. Because they got a job to do too. You know, we got the big bomb squad on the back of our jackets. Of course, everybody's going to look at us. We're just another tool in the machine to make it work. That's it.
Yeah. That job, I'll go into deeper, like I said, in another time when I have these gentlemen on, but it's interesting. I'll explain this deeper when Yurko is on. But I believe the reasoning for why they wanted to do this is because Ramzi Youssef was on trial. And their reasoning being, if he doesn't get acquitted, this is what we're going to do. And I'll explain that deeper when Yurko appears on this fine program. Jeff Oberdier is our guest here on the Mike Maven podcast. This is volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. We're glad he's here. So I want to ask about this. 98, a couple of interesting developments. One, Dennis Mulvasey, you weren't in the Bomb Squad for this, but in 1986, he was going around bombing clinics and he got caught. And now he's out. And he was suspected of his involvement in gunning down a doctor involved in a certain field. I'm not going to get into it because it's a polarizing issue, but you can look it up for my listeners. And also, though, Osama bin Laden does an interview with John Miller. And bin Laden's name had surfaced above ground with the 1993 bombing of the Trade Center. He was linked to Youssef. He talks about wanting to wage war on America. He declares jihad in that interview with Miller. A few months afterwards, the bombing of the embassy in Africa happens. 200 plus people are killed in that. I don't know how much attention I imagine, well, you guys are always watching the world, so you guys have to be paying attention. But when you guys saw that bin Laden interview, if at all, and then you saw what happened at the embassy, your ears are always perked up. You're always on high alert. Yes. But after that, what was the squad's attitude towards bin Laden and the threat that he posed?
Well, we really pushed more training and just a little bit more attention to detail. I mean, you always want to push yourself a little more because we saw a wave of incidents happening overseas. Also, we had some stateside on U.S. soil. And there's bomb technicians always like to connect the dots. We are detectives, not like an old school detective like in 7-5 precinct, but our bomb squad detective then says, how's this bombing over in Africa connect to maybe there's a small bombing in Iceland? Now, how's that little bombing in Iceland maybe connected to the IRA? So you want to look at commonalities, delivery, people involved, and you try to set some type of a path and try to prevent, try to prevent something. And us being as bomb techs, we can't really prevent something other than giving out information that we may have that's important. And yeah, it's interesting times. And we all kind of talked about it, saying, it seems like something's going to happen. We don't know what, you kind of feel it, like the winds of change. Winter's coming, but you can't really say, yeah, winter's here. That's how we kind of felt in the bomb squad, all the way from Dennis, Kevin Barry, down to the newer guys that was there. We all kind of always trying to push each other and was always saying, yeah, something don't smell right. And we tried to do what we could, but on the other hand, we just constantly inundated with a lot of jobs within the city. We had the 50th UN anniversary at one point. Totally busy with that, hours and hours. We got our normal package runs, our Secret Service dignitary protection. So it's always constantly moving. It's always trying to better ourselves through communication and training with each other.
Absolutely. So that actually plays perfectly into the next question, because for some reason, I've never asked any of the other guys I've had on the show about this. When Y2K was coming in, it's 1999, about to be into 2000, and the new millennium is upon us at that moment. And everybody's going crazy. Oh, this is going to happen. There's rumors of this happening and that happening. And intelligence is very, very important to gather. So the Bomb Squad's preparation for the new millennium, Y2K, take me through it.
Well, like you said, everybody's losing their mind. They think the end of the world's coming. And we can only prepare of what we can control. Like we try to always get better equipment, try to get internal training, external training. Like this guy, a gentleman, Kurt Yeager. We really had a great relationship with him. He's one of the best, wisest school person on homemade explosives. And we started seeing an uptick of homemade explosives from the early 1990s going into the 2000s. And he really took grasp of that and really did a lot of research, a lot of testing. So he is a great crutch for us to have. One thing interesting about the Y2K, we was working at Times Square, and that was one of the warmest nights in history, I think, in Times Square. I think it was like 60 degrees for the New Year's Eve celebration. And since it's such a big celebration, there's probably 30 news booths and entertainment areas. And we had to search them all. And of course, all the buildings, the certain ones where the ball drops, we had to search that building. So being 60 degrees with bomb dogs, we worked pretty hard that night. More the dog than me, so we had to give him a break. But yeah, that's one thing I really remember about Y2K. It's just so warm. And it was like, we had to search all this stuff and it's like 60 degrees. Typical cop whining, right? But it is interesting times. And like any time else in history, things jump quickly and you forget about what just happened, then history repeats itself again. If we look past and look around, history always seems to repeat itself.
Yeah.
Because we're so busy going on to the next issue or problem. We got to learn.
Yeah. And let's stay focused on history, because again, another perfect segue. So many guys talk about going and studying the old cases in the basement. And, when you guys were housing the 6th precinct, just going down there, and I believe Dan Richards and Joe Putkowski, I read this in an article in the October 24th, 2002 edition of the New York Times. They culled and curated every single documentation that they could find of every single explosive incident in New York City. So it's a lot to pour through because, as you said earlier, the Bomb Squad is 118 years old now in 2021, started in 1903. How much time would you spend in order to perfect your craft looking over those old cases?
Well, you never totally perfect your craft.
We'll get it as good as it can be.
Funny story is Danny and Joe, they as teammates and they as friends. And just like with Danny and Steve Burbridge, there's always banter going back. So Joe would say, I want to do this. And Danny goes, go ahead, I ain't helping you. But Danny didn't help him. Joe did most of the library downstairs. He spent hours and hours down there getting all the information. I mean, there's still old evidence that's cleared. It's not needed for court cases anymore, but historical evidence from cases from the early 1900s. And we used to tell all the new guys, go down and read 1 or 2 a week. That's it, because if you read 10, it's all going to get jumbled up in your head. If you really start to know 1 or 2 cases, not so intimately, but what it was, what type of person was involved, back then what the investigators did, it'll definitely make you a better bomb guy today. And just knowing your history was phenomenal. I mean, I tip my hat to Joe and Danny. Joe did so much work down there, and he made the bomb squad so much better of having a history of the library. And to this day, I still make fun of him.
Note to self, do not say bomb squad guys perfect their craft. You could dock me 5 points for that. They never perfect their craft, Mike. That's why they don't pay me the big bucks. So that brings us to the morning of 9/11. I remember reading in the book Bomb Squad, a year inside the nation's most exclusive police unit. And for context for my listeners earlier, I know I said the book about something else earlier. I was referring to a different book that was specifically about the 1997 case that we talked about earlier involving the pipe bomb plot in Brooklyn. But this book that I've referenced numerous times in the show, that we'll talk about at length in a moment, revolves around a year spent with the squad, but it also goes back in time to all the different cases the squad have worked. And it talked about that day. You were home, you found out what was going on. Take it from there.
Well, it's is interesting because I was running late, and my daughter I had to drop off at daycare. So one way or another, I don't know what would have happened if I would have been on time. Like anybody else remembers, it was a beautiful day. And the bomb squad has about 3 or 4 different phone lines. So I was calling, and one thing that's interesting is all the lines were busy, which was never, ever done before. So I kept calling the range, calling the office. I said, I'm coming in. I leave, I think the range had a voicemail. Finally, Richie Teasman picked up. And Richie says, no, we're going down. I said, down where? He goes, yeah, a plane hit the building. And still, I think at that point, I think we're still thinking that was a smaller plane. And the most serious thing I remember is going across the George Washington Bridge, and there wasn't a soul on there. And I get down, and Danny and Steve and those guys, Dan McNally, they're already gone. So me and I think it's Joe Patowski, we start gearing up and taking whatever vehicle we had. And, the rest, like everybody else knows, it wasn't a good day.
And you get down there, obviously, it's a chaotic scene. A lot of guys missing, a lot of ESU guys. The bomb squad works closely with ESU. I know you do, a lot of those guys. Danny's missing too. And, I always like to, anytime I get a bomb squad guy on, I always like to ask him, give me a good Dan Richards story.
Danny, like I said, Danny, my first job I had was with Brian Toohey, John Harvey, Joe Patowski, and Danny. And a lot of times it's just you and your partner going to the job. Since they like to bust my horn, since I was an outsider, I was a guy from Ohio that didn't speak New York, they decided that all of them's going to go in the van and make sure I do the job right. So they gave me such a hard time. Like, hey, what are you going to do, rookie? What's this? What's that? I go, I don't know. And actually, I had a box tied to a base of a tree. So that even made it worse. But when it came down to it, once the job got started, I couldn't ask for anything better from these guys. They totally shut it off. What do you need? Look out for this, do this. But going out there, it was a test. And Danny is a unique individual. There's people that come in and out of your life that you always remember. And Danny's one of them. He'd tell you right to your face 5 minutes after meeting you, I don't like you. You annoy me. Brutal honesty. But a half an hour later, that same guy, Danny, I really need $500. Can you really help me out? Danny would go to the ATM machine or go somewhere, bring back 500, goes pay me back when you can. He'd shoot off to Paris on a weekend, maybe take the Monday off, come back. Hey, Danny, where'd you go? I went to Paris. I go, what? But and he loved this country. He loved his family, certain ones. This is a tragic story. His brother,
Billy.
He loved his co-workers, but he's just such an entertaining vehicle to listen to, because you don't know where he's going to go. You think. And some of the best memories I had is just sitting here watching him and Steve Burbridge go back and forth. I mean, it was classic. And he's sorely missed. He didn't have to go down there that day. But the cop in him, the person that wanted to help somebody else, that's within him, went down there. He didn't go down as a bomb tech. He went down there to help people, save people. And, Dan McNally and Danny was right near him. This is weird, two Dannys at the same time. One survived, one didn't. That's how life is. Danny's a good man.
And he's, I always like asking about him. Because I want to do my best to keep his memory alive. And, it's just, as you said, a small avenue into a unique human being. You described him in the December 2001 edition of the Gold Shield magazine as well-rounded and well-grounded. And I think that you get that. And I'll tell a little story here that Sadawi told me when he was on the show. One day, him and Sadawi would fight sometimes too, like brothers would fight, but they would patch it up at the end of it. Yeah, I love you too.
Oh, yeah.
But they were going over something procedural. And it was Steve Burbridge, Dan, and Don Sadawi. And at the end of it, Danny was like, he was irritated at Sadawi. And they were going to go for lunch. And Sadawi's patting himself and he's like, oh man, I don't have my wallet. And he realizes that. And Sadawi says to Danny, I'm not in for lunch. Danny says, why not? He says, I left my wallet at home. Without skipping a beat, Danny reaches into his wallet, saying nothing, doesn't make a big show of it, puts $20 on Don's desk, says, pay me back payday. All right, Sadawi's in for lunch. What do you want? And that was just the kind of guy that he was. And for my listeners, if you're ever in New York City and you happen to be in Greenwich Village, make sure you stop at Morton and Barrow Street and look up because it's named after him, Detective Claude Danny Richards Way, a great guy who, man, I would have loved to have interviewed because he sounded like a heck of a guy. So
great shooter.
Yeah, straight shooter. Absolutely. So, the bomb squad now, 2002, 2003, 2004, that was a really busy time for you guys because as is the case, anytime there's an incident, naturally there's people that are very, very jumpy and anything can look like a device. And you guys answered a lot of calls in that first year afterwards. You're still grappling with trying to process this event that affected everybody. So those first couple of years, and obviously 2004, I believe the Republican National Convention was held in New York City. And there was the guys from ABC News writing the book about you guys. Take me through everything from that little time span.
Take you through everything?
Well, not everything, but
I can't remember
things that stick out.
I just remember it was trying times. I still wear this bracelet for Danny, not so much. Some out of respect for him and to remember him. Mm-hmm. But when we lost Danny, that was the day I kind of grew up and stopped being like, yeah, I'm a big bad bomb tech. I was in the military. Look at me. Made me say, this guy sacrificed everything for the nobody. What I mean by nobody, maybe he wouldn't have saved anybody, but he's willing to go down and try. I go, look at me, I'm greedy. I think I'm a cool bomb guy. That's why I wear this thing. I go, family first, be a gentleman, be a good human being. That's why I wear this also. So after that time, it's a lot of maturity, a lot of guys leaving the bomb squad, older gentlemen, Kevin, Dennis, some other individuals, Jerry Brennan, a lot of guys says, okay, I had enough. Let me go into something else. A lot of new guys came in. A lot of money was pouring in with new equipment, training. So it was a little high speed, and we're still doing our jobs, expanding the K9 program. So you didn't really have that much time to think other than to quickly evaluate where the unit and the people's going within the unit. What do we need? Do we really need this other piece of equipment? And we picked up a lot of guys. So it's a big change. A lot of our old experience and knowledge left. So us younger guys had to pick it up and try to keep that tradition and that experience and knowledge, keep going forward. So that's a lot on somebody's shoulders, and it winds me up a lot, and I appreciate it. I really do.
9 guys from one truck came in, and I believe Jim Carano called them the Knucklehead 9 when they were coming in, because he had a bunch of e-cops arrive. And ESU is usually like a stepping stone to the bomb squad. And so you get some eager guys. Ron Richards is there. Paul Pericone's there. And they ended up doing great work in the bomb squad. Paul he just retired last year, and he was on the show for Volume 6. Ended up spending 18 years there handling some very, very notorious jobs that we'll get into in a moment. And I guess he credited a lot of different guys to Pericone. Unfortunately, I never had the chance to meet and interview Ron Richards, and that's my loss. And for my listeners, he passed, no relation to Claude. He passed away from ground zero related illnesses a number of years ago, but he sounded like a swell individual. But when I was talking with Paul, he credited Joe Patowski. He credited you as being fountains of knowledge who helped him learn and helped him acquire as many skills as possible. And so that brings us to, I guess, the book. And just a brief note on the book before I segue into some of the other cases. Like I said, a year in the life of the bomb squad. What was your personal feeling? Were you for or against the idea of them coming in and chronicling you guys?
I was kind of against it. You know, it's when you seek fanfare, it usually don't work out well. If you just do your job, take care of the people around you. I've been blessed with what I've done in my life. I started out in the military, got lucky, got in the bomb squad, and met some great guys all the way from Dennis McKay to Wes Somerville, Arnie Hornich, the old guys, Neil Monaco, one of the best dog trainers in the nation. Was almost killed 500 years of experience one day at the range, Old Timers Day. So they loved it. I thought I was getting fired, but there's a little mishap, and the old guys loved it. And Paulie, I appreciate that you thought I was wise enough to teach you something. But it was interesting. Like we lost Danny Richards. And the first time I met Ron, another Richards. Some of my best friends, I know Paulie and Ronnie was really tight. But certain people in my life, when I first meet him, you kind of look at him like, man, he's a jerk. But they become my best friends because they're so unique. Like Danny Richards was, Ray Buckowitz, Ronnie. Ronnie was an individual who walks in your life. And like Mike Walsh, he just used to laugh on how Ronnie would conduct himself. He's a great individual. Another person we lost too soon.
That book, I highly recommend reading it. It's fun. So I skipped over it. And I don't want to keep it too long, so I promise I'll hit on these things and then we'll conclude.
Yeah, we talk about anything you want.
But that 100th anniversary, I mean, it's under the somber backdrop of what had happened a year and a half prior, but it's still a happy occasion. 100 years of the bomb squad. Obviously, the arson explosion squad was there too, because you guys worked hand in hand with them. But putting it together, getting all the old timers there, take me through the process of finding these guys and then getting them together at the range.
Yeah, that was a task. And this guy, Tommy, came from Arson Explosion. He did a lot of work with that. He's just one of the good old gumshoe detectives. He knew how to get a hold of people, how to put things together. And it was great. I mean, to see these old faces and got to meet new ones from around the country. Like you said, 100 years old. You know, I love the FBI, ATF, and all this, and our bomb school down in Huntsville, Alabama. but we came from a unit that used to teach bomb techs from all around the nation. So I held that in high regard. In the military, you wear a certain crab. We call it the crab. It's like a little bomb pin. In the civilians, you wear a different one. And I like loyalty. I like tradition. I didn't like civilian guys wearing the EOD pin.
Quick pause here on the Mike and Haven podcast. As you were saying.
So the EOD badge, guys that go through EOD school earn that. They spend almost a year in school. The civilian guys, they earn their badge down at Huntsville. Totally respect that. So I don't like the mingling of the badges. Either you wear it, that you earned it, or you don't. So I do like that tradition. And that's why I love the NYPD Bomb Squad, because between Joe Patowski doing that library downstairs, the evidence and stuff we have at the range that goes back many years, and the people like Anthony Sim, like I said, Wes Somerville's, Arnie Orange, these guys back in the day, they did hand entries. They didn't have the nice little robots and the nice bomb suits. So you got to know your history and respect, because we are the oldest bomb squad. And when we had the 100th anniversary, it's very important to me, and we had a lot of laughs and a lot of good times.
There was a particularly funny story because these guys were crafty. I one of the old timers were describing it in the magazine. It was called Actively Retired, to where way before they had any of this equipment, they were dealing with the Mad Bomber. And one of the devices, they got like one of the bulletproof windshields from some gangster's car. And they're reaching around with like one of these like metal claws trying to actively work the device. And I'm like, just the ingenuity. Like that, there's a line from The Wire, oh, he's the real police. That's the real bomb squad. Not that I'm taking anything away from the guys that have had on, because listen, it's still scary, even with all that equipment, with the suits they have now. But imagine having none of that. And you have to think on the fly. And they really, really did, which was impressive. So there's this is right before your retirement. There's two separate incidents in Times Square. One got more attention than the other. 2008 and 2010. We'll talk about 2010 in a second, which was the more notable too. But 2008, this was just weird. I kind of vaguely remember it, and I read more about it in preparation for this interview. To this day, I don't think they ever found the individual that did it, set off a very small device. It didn't hurt anybody, didn't kill anybody. That's good. But nonetheless, it was kind of scary. It's in Times Square. I believe one of the presidential candidates, because it's the year of the election, commented on it. That job, again, talk about jobs that don't really get talked about too much. Take me through the bomb squad's investigation into that and what the motive was, if any.
Well, that was a strange period. Like you talked about the old guys, with hardly any equipment. And if you look through some of the old cases in the bomb squad, back then there's a lot of what we call high explosives. It wasn't gunpowder. This stuff was like dynamite, very energetic. So in this period, now they're using what we call low explosive powder. Still energetic, but not as bad as dynamite. So the change happened, and everything always changes, come back, and repeats itself. And this stuff is an ammo can in front of the recruiters center. And like you said, to this day, I don't know if they solved the case. That's how New York is. Sometimes we have the best cameras. When you look at the cameras, like everything's fuzzy. Like, are we supposed to be NYPD the best and have all this great equipment? And guess what? We got a fuzzy camera. So it is, I wouldn't say like people sometimes downplay like devices. Like this device, very powerful, a lot of weight of the material, and if somebody was near, they would have died. Just it's very powerful. Then about the same time, not too far after that, we had the British consulate bombing. Me and Brian sent up, and Mike Walsh. And after that was the Mexican consulate. And we always try to, like I said earlier, you try to make a connection. Sometimes there's no connection, it's just coincidence. Then there's some other bombings. Paul had one on the west side at a theater. So all this is, they're using containers and like low explosives. So it's a different mode, different method. And prior to that, we had a few. Dennis Mulcahy had one in Wall Street. So we always try to make these connections. Sometimes you don't. Then my last job, I was on the job, I was at the range, it was at Times Square, 2010, the truck attempt. I mean, that's why you thank civilians. Civilians and first responders are the ones that usually, if they don't catch it, then we don't know about it. So there's a civilian that had the Times Square in 2010.
That was the case of the primary handler of that case for the bomb squad was, again, somebody talk about people gone too soon, Greg Abate, who we lost to a heart attack a number of years ago. Greg was an ECOP for a number of years, but finished out his career in the bomb squad.
And a lifeguard.
And a lifeguard too. I didn't know. Ray Clare, again, another guy I need to get on the show. Ray Clare also was on that job. And they went down there and they handled it. And that I always wonder about that particular job, because what is the goal of terrorism? And it's fear. And would it have been as significant as the 11th in terms of the death toll? No, I don't think anything will ever replicate the death toll from that day. Hopefully nothing does. But that job, it would have created, you're talking about the heart of New York City, the tourist capital of the world. Had that device functioned, I mean, numerous people would have been injured, if not killed, and it would have created a paralysis of fear in the city. So it was detected, it was handled, and the bomber was eventually sentenced to life in prison, and that's a very good thing. And so that moves on ahead to your retirement. I guess you talked earlier about guys like Kevin Barry and Dennis Mulcahy saying, well-deserved, I've had enough, I'm going to put in my papers, and that's fine, they earned it. Same thing with you. I don't know if that job was a tipping point, but prior to that job even happening, were you thinking about it? Like, yeah, this is going to be my last year?
Yeah, I was thinking about it because, my daughter's getting older. And like I said, with this bracelet, makes me wise up and think more about family, more about life at home. Because I was married to a cop. So sometimes having a babysitter or time off is really hard, because both me and my wife was on the job. We benefited in some ways, in other ways we didn't. Times Square, I think it was a total success in one way, because they got the truck there. They got the means. We don't even talk about this other guy that came from Denver, Colorado, going to Brooklyn. That's another weird job. A lot of stuff in his apartment, a lot of things happened with that, which turned out well for us. But the Times Square, it was lucky. The guy didn't have much bomb training, not much money. He's somewhat of an idiot of the stuff he bought, which was good for us. Left one heck of a trail. But they succeeded on getting it there. And if they get it there once, just like the 93 bombing, World Trade Center, the bad guys looked at that as a failure. Also successful. I mean, they did blow it up. But what happened in 2001? They came back and did it right.
Yeah.
So this was definitely backed by some bad guys. So they look at it as a total failure in Times Square in 2010. These people are very patient. Whoever these people I talk about are, they're very patient. And they'll pick a time in choosing, and I'd assume, like the second 9/11, the second World Trade Center, excuse me, they'll probably try something like this again, and they'll probably succeed.
And that's
Let's hope not.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Let's hope not indeed, because the thing that's so sad to me is that after 93, so many people within the intelligence circles, guys like John O'Neill from the FBI, guys like Ron Bucca, who was a fire marshal in the FDNY, but was also a Army intelligence officer. I'm pretty sure a guy like Danny Richards, all of them were saying they're going to come back. They're not through. They didn't do, Ramsey Youssef himself said it when an FBI agent was flying him over in 1997, shortly before he was convicted. The FBI agent infamously says to him, "See, Ramsey, they're still standing." Ramsey looks at him, calm as can be. "Next time, we'll bring them both down."
Yeah.
And, in 2001, that's what they did. Unfortunately, in that day, or on that day, I should say, the guys that were warning that this would happen, John O'Neill, Ron Bucca, Danny Richards, all those guys were killed. So I hope, and I said this a while ago on a different show, not this one, that I hope that there aren't similar figures today saying, well, we got to be on the lookout. We got to be on the lookout. That'll become casualties in the next big thing. But, listen, the intelligence operation is a great one. They're 5 steps ahead of these bad guys. We saw in stories leading up to the 20th anniversary, a look at how they operate. Not everything, because they can't talk about everything, obviously, but just what they do on the surface level. And it's amazing. So hopefully that'll continue to work as well as it has.
Yeah, it's tough. Like Ramsey, a lot of people don't know that he was a coordinator to set up all these bombs on aircraft coming across from overseas. And he did, and that was the first time like liquid explosives was used. And he was somewhat successful at that. All of a sudden now he does 1993. I mean, this guy wasn't going to give up. And there's guys now that's not going to give up. So our intel and everybody, we always got to work hard. I hate that saying where the bad guy only has to get lucky once. There is some validity in that. And it's sad. I just hope it don't happen again, but odds are it probably will.
So
we prevent it.
That's true. And you got it. We all, even as civilians, there's the old adage, if you see something, say something. I was in the city recently, and same thing. I kind of had my head on a swivel because, crime in general, you have to. You can't walk around lackadaisical. But especially now with where we're at these days, it's something to be especially mindful of. So, 2010 to the present, as I mentioned when I was introducing you, you're an instructor. So I guess it's your way of giving back, which is nice. Tell me what exactly you've been up to since you call it a career.
Well, I always stay in touch with the bomb squad and try not to be a pest. I ended up going to LaGuardia Airport and being an explosive specialist there. I did that up till August of this year. So I spent about 11 years over there, and time flew on me. I felt I liked that job. It's like totally different from being like an EOD in the military, being in the NYPD bomb squad. Now I'm more of a facilitator, helping younger people. The workforce at TSA, we're trying to show them what to look for at the checkpoint, check baggage, what bombs kind of look like, what certain mannerisms you can't profile, but there's certain mannerisms bad people may do before they're going to do something bad, especially at a checkpoint. And they're hardworking men and women that don't make that much. And they're expected to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and be at a checkpoint so you and me can fly and get on our flight. So it's a tough job, I get it. So we tried to make it easier for them. And we would respond if they did find something. And we are still interacting with the bomb squads because we had 3 airports, I think 3. Iceland, Stewart, Westchester, and LaGuardia. Yeah, so it is responsible for airports. In the meantime, I was doing some training for certain organizations. And now I'm working for another one part-time, semi-retired. So more or less what I teach now is first responders out in New Mexico. And I didn't know how vital that was until I became an instructor out there. Because some of these kids that you look at, they're like 22 years old. and they already been on 2 bombings in their city, but they never really had any type of training. Or you got a 10-year veteran in a small police department somewhere, they never know what a stick of dynamite is. So it's a great training to start and expand on for all first responders out there. So I'm very blessed they picked me up and they thought highly enough where I can instruct out there.
Thank you for doing that. That brings us to the concluding segment, rapid fire. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you have too. It's 5 hit run questions from me, 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about it earlier when you were telling me that the stories of the squad room and things like that. But nonetheless, I'll still ask you, besides some of the guys you mentioned, maybe you could still expand on on how funny they were. Funniest colleagues you ever had?
Ronnie, definitely. Ray Buckowitz. And we're big boys sometimes. So I don't give out too many secrets, but we used to booby trap, and Ray was phenomenal with electronics, and I wasn't that good. So we put a bomb like with a truck horn up in the fake ceiling, and like 3 o'clock in the morning, the air horn would go off. Or if guys go in the bathroom at the range, we'd throw smoke bombs right when they went inside, stuff like that. I mean, but it was bantering. It was brotherhood, sisterhood, and Ray was just a master at that. And he definitely comes to mind.
Second most, listen, there's a lot of hard days, but there are also great days in the police department, the fire department. Yeah. So most uplifting job you've ever responded to?
It's probably when I was a housing cop. They muster all these cops together as a category special missing child. He had autism. He's about 10 years old. And it's getting cold out, especially at night. So, they mobilize everybody. And then we found him. We found him over in a park. And we searched that park before. But maybe with the kid moving, and where we found him was like near the bushes. And but to see the joy on the parents' and family's face, because you can read every day in the paper, these kids go missing, a lot of them, it's not good. So that job was so uplifting to me because I did the cop thing. I saved the day. We got this kid. He had autism. His family is a happy ending, because a lot of times you don't have happy endings. So that's one of the jobs that's really special to me.
Awesome. So 4th, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
There's a little German restaurant down by the bomb squad. I can't, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of it. But any one of your other guests, like Paulie remembers it. And it's authentic German food. You would walk right by it. It's like 2 streets down from Bleecker. I think it's, I'm trying to think of it. I hate to say it, but I can't remember. I used to love Carmine's. I think Carmine's closed now. That's what I heard. I'm in North Carolina now. Now, this little place is great. It's very authentic German restaurant. Like I said, you walk right by it if you didn't know it was there. And I apologize. I can't remember the name of it.
That's okay. I'll have to check it out next time I'm in the city, if I'm in the area. So 5th and finally, given you experiences, over the course of 20 years, you talked about mentoring the younger guys now, and even some of the older guys that don't see them much action. But nonetheless, for anybody that's coming on the job now, after everything that's happened with the pandemic and other stuff, what advice would you give a young cop?
Oh, you can always give a lot of advice. First thing is, what I learned personally is always try to put your family first. Sometimes us as first responders, cops, firemen, EMS, our first marriage is the job. You got to have a balance. You got to cut the stuff off. We all see great things. We all see terrible things. Doesn't matter if it's EMS, firemen, whoever. You can't take that stuff home. It's not healthy. It's only a job. You go in there, you take care of yourself, you take care of your coworkers, do the best job you can, whatever that is. If you're an instructor at the shooting range, Be a good instructor. Teach these young kids how to shoot the gun and maintain it. During the bomb squad, be a good bomb tech. Just don't wear the shirt. And that's the best advice I can get. Just be who you are. Be true, like Danny Richards. Danny Richards is true to who he was. He loved the bomb squad, but he loved his personal life. He took care of his personal life also. And that's why I say take care of yourself. Because one day you'll be in my situation, you're retired and hopefully enjoying life. And one day we won't be here. So enjoy it until that day comes.
So there you have it. Don't wear that shirt. Whatever you do, bomb technicians, don't you dare wear that shirt.
You earn it. You just don't wear it. The guys know what I'm talking about.
There you go. So that is the conclusion of what is volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad, a miniseries that of the three that I have, one being on emergency service, one being on the FDNY, and then this one, have really become the backbone of this show that I really love to do because I've met so many great people, Jeff included. And I have to thank everybody that's come on along the way, Don Sadawi, Dan McNally, Jim Carano, Paracone, and the many great guys that hopefully I could have on in the future. I can hear their stories too. And today, Jeff, you were amazing. So before we conclude, if you want to give any shout outs, anything like that, somebody that you want to mention, go right ahead.
Well, my family, my wife and my daughter, because without them, this ain't Academy Award winning thing, but it's true. If you don't got a foundation behind you, you got nothing. They stuck through me with all this craziness. And all my coworkers, both as regular street cop and the guys in the bomb squad, FBI, I can't remember all these names, but you know who you are. I appreciate everything you've done for me. You stuck with me. We had a lot of fun. And I wish everybody well, happiness, and health. I really do.
I like to expand. Thank you for that. I like to expand on what I just said. Thank you to everybody from A&E and the Bomb Squad that has taken the time to talk to me. This miniseries is going to keep going, and I can't believe we're 15 volumes into it. I want to thank Jeff today, like I said, for being here. I want to thank Bill Ryan from A&E, also Don Sadawi, like I said, Paulie Paracone, Danny McNally, Jimmy Carano, and Kevin Barry, who've all made the time for me. It's been a great show. So coming up on the Mike and Haven podcast, a guy that Jeff is familiar with from his days in housing. He was a deputy chief with the NYPD, but he rose through the ranks primarily in housing. One, Mr. John Cutter, will be on the show Tuesday to talk with me about his career. An author, too. He should be a lot of fun. And Friday, I'm really looking forward to this one. Hopefully, if the world can behave itself and no news will break of any significance, because Ashley Banfield will be coming on the show this Friday. She'll be very cool to talk to, I hope. And I'm booking some more guests for next week. And I'll talk about that as the time gets closer. In the meantime, this has been volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. I'm Mike Colón. We will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
See you.